Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. As we continue with Part 9, The Cycles of Transmigration from the Phoenix by Manly P. Hall. The Cycles of Transmigration. The Mahayana, or Great Vehicle of Buddhism, was advanced as a compromise to the extreme austerities of the primitive faith. The founder of the sect is unknown, but the celebrated monk, Nagarjuna, is its most distinguished exponent and promulgator. Nagarjuna studied at the famous Nalanda University, the chief school of Buddhist theology of his time, the 2nd century AD. This patriarch declared that he had discovered the previously unknown writing of Gautama Buddha, called the Prajna Paramita, which may be roughly interpreted as the method of arriving at the distant side of wisdom. Nagarjuna held that Buddha had concealed these traditions because the world in his day had not yet earned the right to receive such superior instruction. He had therefore entrusted the doctrine to the keeping of the Naga demigods, or serpent kings, who in turn, upon the dawn of a more enlightened era, gave it into the custody of Nagarjuna. The Mahayana system softens the austere philosophic atheism of Buddha, clothing the simple truths in elaborate symbolism and evolving a tradition calculated to impress with its intricacy and splendor the mind of priest and layman alike. Mahayana is termed the middle path, an approach to the state of nirvana broadened to admit those of every class and sect, even assuming the possibility of those not belonging to holy orders achieving to the highest or Buddha state. It would not be erroneous to say that the tenets expounded by Nagarjuna turned Buddhism from a philosophy to a religion. He was a sort of Oriental St. Paul who elevated words above works, so that salvation became more or less a matter of orthodoxy rather than of integrity. On the other hand, it would be unfair not to emphasize the high order of Nagarjuna's metaphysical speculations. He created out of the moralisms of Sakyamuni a complex transcendentalism which shows a strange blending of Brahmanic and Buddhistic interests. It is evident that Gautama Buddha built his philosophy upon the foundation of the Brahman Vedas and Puranas. The major deviation is in the matter of the gods, who in the Buddhist system lose their creative attributes and become the servants of law rather than arbitrary despots. The Mahayana school appealed to the highly cultivated imagination of the Easterner. He was accustomed to view the universe as a battlefield of gods and demons, and hence found no difficulty in visualizing three-faced Brahmas or seven-headed Nagas. Nagarjuna converted all the lokas and talas, together with the creatures inhabiting them, to the Buddhist way of thinking. So the old system continued under new management. The Hinayana, or the little vehicle, the imperfect way, as it came to be called by comparison, could bring but a small number of mankind to perfection. The purely philosophic aspects of Gautama Buddha's teaching could no more be expected to attract the rank and file of the Orient than could the metaphysical speculations of Plato intrigue the great proletarian class of the West. Most men think with their hands, contemplate with their eyes, and venerate with their lips. The Mahayana school turned northward to find its stronghold amid the snow-capped peaks of Tibet, and the more severe and simple Hinayana school turned southward to meditate amid the gently swaying banyans of Ceylon. No clear line of demarcation, however, can be drawn as between northern and southern Buddhism, as each division has been more or less tinctured with the attitudes of the other. The wheel of transmigratory existence, reproduced from the Journal of the Buddhist Text Society of India. The Pandit Hariprasad Kastri has analyzed the differences between the two schools in substance as follows. The Hinayana commences the practice of all meritorious acts for the control, for the peace, and for the extinction absorption of their own souls. This is not the noblest end to which a high-spirited bodhisattva should strive. He should not only desire to place himself in truth, but should also strive to place all other sentient beings in truth. Thus, the Hinayana seeks achievement for self alone, and the Mahayana for self only, that it may lead and serve others. The Pandit continues, when a man knows everything, he knows the miseries of the world, and therefore cannot enter nirvana without stretching a helping hand to the suffering millions all around him. While secure in his own prospect of emancipation, he delays accepting it for the good of others. There have been many Buddhas who by their preaching emancipate, and will emancipate innumerable sentient beings. But none of these stands as high as Avalokitesvara, who has vowed not to enter the blissful region while there is a single sentient being unemancipated. The Mahayana school therefore regards accomplishment per se as a selfish and unworthy motive for action. The Hinayana in turn accuse the Mahayana sect of having departed from the more austere virtues to the confusion of issue and the worship of chimeras. The Buddhism of Tibet is also further adulterated by the Tantric cults. Tantrism sprang from the Shivan worshippers and is responsible for the highly complicated pantheon of Lamaism, especially in regard to the great number of demons incorporated therein. Tantrism also clouded the issues by assigning to each of the various celestial entities a Sakti, or female counterpart. It is not improbable that the worship of Shiva in India antedates both that of Brahma and Vishnu. Shiva belongs to the primitive pre-Vedic folklore of India. Even as in Scandinavia, the god Thor, or the Thunderer, was far older than the pantheon led by Odin, of which he later became a part. Before the advent of Buddhism, Tibet was a cannibalistic country, the people worshipping in the most primitive and barbaric fashion divinities no better than demons, and propitiating them with infernal necromancies and human sacrifice. This old faith is now referred to as the Bond. Although it has almost ceased as a separate institution, it still survives as a more or less degraded element in trans-Himalayan Buddhism. The Black Hat Lamas in particular, as well as sorcerers of all classes, still mingle Bon sorcery with their Buddhist magic. This also probably accounts, to some degree at least, for the streak of cruelty in itself utterly un-Buddhistic, which persists among the less educated followers of Lamaism. Many of the Lama series of Little Tibet and Mongolia are hotbeds of Dugpas, sorcerers of the left-hand path who control the elemental spirits and practice demonolatry. In the north, therefore, we see the simple moralisms of Gautama Buddha involved in a complex ceremonialism. The books containing the Sutras of Enlightenment now lie on the altars with a wand fashioned from a human thigh bone on one side and a prayer wheel inlaid with beans on the other. To those who find difficulty in discerning true values, the Tantric confusion now called Lamism would appear utterly hopeless. There is, however, a magnificent order beneath the chaos. Not altogether evident at first, there is in it a wholeness great enough to enclose the discord. The doctrines of Tibet are unspeakably rich in metaphysical and philosophical verities, while the Arhats and Mahatmas have, for the most part, deserted the temples of Lamaism. Sages still gather there, whose wisdom is the hope of the world. The inscrutable Lama, as he sits spinning his wheel or saying the well-worn beads of his rosary, has one metaphysical finger on the pulse of the world. Occidentals, with all their worldly wisdom, could make neither head nor tail of the thoughts moving behind that wrinkled Mongolian countenance. Yet the old man has a private wire from the infinite, and he senses aspects of universal law wholly beyond the comprehension of the money-grabbing multitude. Before undertaking a detailed study of the Buddhist wheel of life, it's necessary to establish the substance and nature of that identity which, though ever-changing in its condition and state, is unchanging in its intrinsic being. To understand transmigration, or the sattvic movement of Buddhism, is indeed to understand its greatest doctrine, a fabric which has been reared to the astonishment of all who have sought to learn its intricate architecture, its fine moldings, or its delicate workmanship. See Journal of the Buddhist Text Society of India. What then is a sattva? And what is the sattvic movement? A sattva is a conscious being or entity which exists from all time to all time, being in every sense utterly immortal until it enters nirvana, where it is merged in eternity. A sattva moves from one state to another, but must always be in some state. These motions or movements of the sattva are termed transmigrations, in that they do not constitute a passing from body out of body, but rather a continuous passing from one body to another. All animate creatures are primarily sattvas, in that the sattva is the real substance of their animation, and all creatures are bound together by this common sattvic relationship. Recognizing that the experiences of life exist only through these relationships, the enlightened sanctify such relationships, seeing in all beings kindred entities co-eternal with themselves. The sattva then is the subject of transmigration, even as nirvana is the object. The Mahayana school, writes Sri Sarat Chandra Das, teaches that neither spirit nor substance nor law nor organized life is self-created. All such phenomena are in mutual relation and exist only by virtue of such relationship. Explaining how things which seem to have an actual existence have only a relative one, this learned author uses the example of a house. What is a house, he asks? Is it the door, the roof, the pillar, or is it the sum of them? He answers his own question by saying that it is neither the parts separately nor the parts together, for house is simply a name to signify the relation of these parts. Sri Sarat Chandra Das arrives at the following conclusion. Consistent with this doctrine, Buddhists do not believe in the existence of a creator, so there can be no creation. According to them, the world has existed from eternity, the living beings in it also existing from eternity, and so spirit and substance are co-eternal. The indivisible spirit, like absolute matter or atom, cannot cease to exist. Their quantity cannot be diminished or increased. It follows that as nothing can be added to or taken from, then all forms are merely relationships of eternal principles. Nothing which is real can be annihilated, nor can anything which is unreal be rendered permanent. Life, then, in all its aspects, is simply the sattva or self moving through spheres of relationships, the not-selves as being in substance unreal, and wisdom lies in the realization of this supreme truth. Key to the departments of the Wheel of Life. Reproduction from Dr. Austin Waddell's rare work, The Buddhism of Tibet. We can now turn to a specific discussion of the Bhava Chakra, or the Wheel of Transmigratory Existence. The two examples published with this essay show the wheel in both a square as well as a round form. The circular chart is from the frescoes of the Tashiding Monastery at Sikkim and was published by Dr. Waddell in the Buddhism of Tibet. The square drawing was obtained from Lhasa and belongs to the Yellow Cap School. It was published in Volume 3 of the Journal of Buddhist Text Society of India. We are also reproducing Dr. Waddell's key to the circular chakra as a valuable commentary to the material involved. In both cases, the wheel is held by a horrible red monster called Dagzin in Tibetan. This figure represents to the Mahayana mind the horror of egoism as the most deplorable state of selfishness. The wheel of birth and death is supported by egoism, by belief in the reality of illusionary things. Altruism is the release from egoism. It is the destroyer of the monster who supports the illusion. It is another form of the statement that he who saves his life shall lose it, and he who loses it for the sake of righteousness shall find it again. Belief in matter binds man to matter. Belief in the reality of phenomenal experience binds him to the phenomenal world. The spheres of the bodhisattvas and Buddhas are not included in this wheel because they are outside the boundary of egoism. They live not for themselves, but for others, and in departing from their personal interests, they depart also from the sphere of misery and destruction. It would be natural to ask, what makes the wheel go around? Or possibly more correctly, what makes the sattva go around the wheel? The answer is karma. All beings or sattvas are continually creating karma. In other words, they exist in action, and action presupposes consequence. Consequence, in turn, engenders consequences, and the nidanas, or consequences of action, are established. An animate sentient being, writes one author, in contradistinction to an inanimate object, has reactions for doings called in Sanskrit karma, which are coexistent with it from eternity. Karma is therefore eternal and inseparable from the sattva or the sattvic existence. Karma has been interpreted as fate or destiny, but these terms generally imply some providential agency beyond human control. Karma is the inevitable reaction of action. Its substance is the merits and demerits of the life. Walt Whitman indulged in Buddhistic fatalism when he said, "That which is mine own shall know my face." Karma, then, moves the sattva upon the wheel, changing the environment to meet the merit of the act. Karma may be good or evil, or a combination of both. It generally manifests in the latter confused state, where contradictory impulses result in the discord and confusion of earthly life. When one who has achieved the dignity of a bodhisattva or enlightened being has by thought and action exhausted all bad karma, and has through realization come to a state wherein he ceases to accumulate the causes of misery, he is designated a Buddha. In such a one, all evil has ceased as a cause of reaction, and he is said to step down from or release his hold upon the spinning wheel of transmigration. With the exception of a Buddha, All other sattvas have complex karma, where good and evil are mixed up in varied proportions. Bad karma is the element of change in a sattva, while good karma is the element of purity. One contaminates and degrades the sattva, the other purifies and elevates. On account of their bad karma, sattvas are changeable. Immortality, or more correctly the indefinable term, nirvana, lies therefore in the continual practice of good, and mortality in the perpetuation of error through unbalanced attitudes. Mixed karma causes the being or self to vacillate erratically from one state to another through thousands of lives and millions of years, and to experience in these immense periods alternations of happiness and misery. The degree of happiness is measured by the intensity of the accumulated virtue, and conversely the degree of misery by the intensity of the accumulated vice. By his revelation of these mysteries to mankind, Gautama Buddha gained for himself the title of the Great Benefactor, as expressed in the Vinaya texts. Of all objects which proceed from a cause, the Tathagata has explained the cause, and he has explained their cessation also. This is the doctrine of the great Samana, the Bhava Chakra, copied by Dr. Waddell from the frescoes of the Tashiding Monastery at Sikkim. In the Mahayana Dharma Chakra here pictured, the central sections are divided into 6 major compartments. These divisions represent the 6 possible states or conditions of phenomenal activity, and together constitute the Samsara Chakra, or the wheel of worldly existence. In reality, they are the domains of the 6 states of karma. A sattva, or being, must continually be in one of these 6 states until through Buddhahood it is liberated from its migrations. As the Platonists might say that a thing must always be in a place, so the Buddhists affirm that a being must always be in a state, the nature and substance of this state being determined by karma. 2 planes are omitted from these diagrams, one of which consists of those elemental forces which have not yet developed a sattvic or conscious being, the other the abode of the enlightened, where those dwell who are completely emancipated from the wheel of birth and death. Karma is ever building bodies in the 6 compartments of the wheel, which should be regarded as planes of life. In reality, the 6 planetary continents which emerge from the central sun, or the 6 bodies through which consciousness passes on its road to perfection. The sattva must pass from one of these bodies to another until all evil karma has been expiated. As in Egypt, Typhon swallows those who are found wanting in the ceremonial of the weighing of the soul, so in Tibet the Dagzin monster swallows up or immerses in various states of matter the sattvas that have not achieved the bodhisattvic tranquility. In both the square and circular diagrams, the inner space is divided horizontally into an upper and a lower section. Together, these 2 constitute the samsara, or the circle of worldly influences. The upper and the lower halves are devoted respectively to the illusions of happiness and the illusions of misery, being called sugati and durgati. Those sattvas whose good karma promises them a favorable rebirth expect to reside in the upper, or sugati hemisphere, while those of a depraved spirit will be confronted with the misfortunes of the infernal or durgati state. The 3 divisions of the sugati state are called sura loka, the abode of the gods, Asura Loka, the abode of the demigods, and Nara Loka, the abode of men. In the square drawing, the sphere of the Naras, or human beings, is located in the central or highest part. The sphere of the gods, or devas, is upon the left, and that of the Asuras, or demigods, upon the right. In the circular figure, the human sphere is at the left, that of the gods under Indra in the upper center, and that of the Asuras, or Titans, at the right. In the interpretation of these 3 states, it should be borne in mind that the human state was regarded as more desirable than that of the gods or demigods. The highest good, other than nirvana, to which the Tibetan can look forward, is to be immediately reborn in the human state. For it is in the human state only that he can achieve Buddhahood. This, according to Sri Sarat Chandra Das, is the most desirable of all the states. The great benefit of being born in the man state is that in this state, if the good karma be sufficient and the will rightly directed, the way may be seen, the first ray of Buddha lights upon the sattva and he becomes a bodhisattva. Henceforward, he enjoys all the privileges of a bodhisattva. He has undergone the great renunciation and ascends through the various stages of sainthood to the border of the worldly existence. Having renounced all, even good works, he attains merit by meditation. He has a knowledge of his past births, all the circumstances of which have been carefully noted in a diary. He is allowed to let his prayers and merits prevail for others, the less fortunate sattvas in the other 5 states. At length he passes beyond the bounds of worldly existence to become a Buddha and enjoy endless bliss in nirvana. Special attention should be given at this point to a little recognized element of Northern Buddhist metaphysics. As already intimated, Buddha reduced the status of the divinities until gods ceased to possess really divine attributes, becoming merely vehicles for the merits of the transmigrating sattvas. Godhood, therefore, is but a reward for good karma, and far from being permanent, may be lost at any moment. The Buddhist monk fears to be incarnated as a god, lest this circumstance prevent him from achieving Buddhahood. To be born in Suraloka is the reward of having earned by action terrestrial power and bliss. In this aspect, the gods are but symbols of various constructive ambitions, less, however, than the highest ambition, that of liberation. The sattva establishes those consequences which entitle it to a period of existence in Indra's heaven. And as karma draws the being to rebirth here, so it draws it to rebirth in the paradisiacal sphere, where it remains as long as the merits continue by which it was established there. When these merits become exhausted or demerits destroy the karma which binds the sattva to the heaven worlds, the being falls like a plummet to some lower level to which the new karma has brought it. The position of the gods and the duration of the period of their bliss are determined, as in the case of human beings, by the extent of their moral merits, that is to say, the merits they showed when they lived as men on earth, or in some sphere not heaven. Thus the wheel of life turns. Indra, Brahma, and others who were once gods in heaven may today be ordinary mortal men in exalted or in lowly sphere of life, and vice versa, the turn of the great wheel which one day exalts men to gods in heaven, and another brings down gods to be men on earth, explains 2 great truths, one of which is frequently lost sight of. We believe pretty generally what all scriptures teach, namely the divinity of man or the God upon earth, but we do not so generally believe in the often equally necessary truth, viz. The humanity of God. After the exhaustion of the merits with which terminates his celestial bliss, he has to revert to his former position, or to a worse state in this world. Therefore, it is foolish on the part of man to lay out so much of his merits in the wrong direction instead of utilizing the same to the right end, ensuring his attaining to the state of Bodhi or enlightenment. See Journal of the Buddhist Text Society of India. All the departments of the wheel have opposite states. The lower have their opposites above, to which the merits of the sattvas cause them to ascend. The higher also have their opposites in the lower, to which their demerits force them. There is no permanence in any of the 6 states, for although existence in them may be extended over a vast period of time, and the happiness or misery may seem interminable, the sattvic motion howls from one to another without end. But the sattva, when he sees the prospect of a happy life before him, which his good doings, karma, have secured for him, forgets the true secrets that underlie the worldly existence and holds firmly to the vanishing unrealities which plunge him into the sea of continual suffering. He should therefore not count much upon the pleasures of the heaven of Indra, or the longevity of Brahma Loka, which, however long it may appear, is nothing but less than a second in the ocean of eternity. For when the effects of his good deeds come to an end, he is sure suddenly to fall headlong into the state of Durgati, that is, to bottomless perdition. While the sattvas continue in this blessed though transient state of humanity, they should exert themselves both by action and by meditation to apply the merits that have already been amassed by them till now, and that are still to their credit, for the attainment of that state of spiritually enlightened existence called Buddhahood. In this world, health, wealth, power, etc., which constitute our happiness, are transient, lasting for a month, a year or more. They delude us like the pleasures of a dream. Therefore, without aspiring to the state of bliss on earth or in heaven, we should in this life endeavor to get out of this sea of samsara and to possess those spiritual accomplishments and resources which are essential for the attainment of the most perfect state of supreme enlightenment. Compiled from the Tibetan Buddhist works, Sninthig, Lamrim Chenpo, and Pagsam Tisu, The Life of Padmasambhava, leaf of a Tibetan manuscript concerned with the introduction of Buddhism into Tibet. The human is the median state between the pleasures of heaven and the miseries of hell. When the sattva is in the infernal worlds, its powers of discrimination and discernment are destroyed by the miseries of retributive karma. And while the sattva is in the heavenly state, its perspective is quite as effectually ruined by the blissfulness of its state and the beautiful illusions which surround it. Human existence is a blending of all the lokas or conditions, whether joy or sorrow. Only in the human state, therefore, is the sattva capable of rationally determining that which is the greatest good. Hence, the bodhisattva must rise directly from the human state, and Naraloka becomes the vestibule of nirvana. An interesting story is told that throws considerable light upon the heavenly state. There was once a very wise king named Mandata who earned so much good karma for himself that he reincarnated in Suraloka as the god Indra himself. Now there were several sattvas who also reached such heights of achievement that 6 of them were likewise reborn as Indra. This demonstrates a very important doctrine, namely that the gods are not personalities but states of consciousness, and therefore more than one person may be of that state at the same time and consequently be that god. After a time, King Mandata began wishing that he was the only Indra. Some very bad karma resulted, and, like a bankrupt in the hands of his creditors, he was ruined. His sattva relapsed into an infernal state, where he had time to meditate upon the retribution wrought by the demerits of envy. Even heaven is not a place of security, and sattvas stay there only while they remain worthy of its bliss. The lower hemisphere of the Great Wheel of Transmigration is likewise divided into 3 unfortunate states, of which the worst is Naraka, or hell. In both the figures, this is located at the nadir of the wheel. On the circular diagram, Preta Yoni, or the ghost state, Tartarus, is to the left, and Tiryak Yoni, or the animal state, is to the right of this lowest hell. In the square figure, the animal world is on the left and the ghost state on the right. A sattva, whose demerits are too great to permit its rebirth in the upper hemisphere, but not great enough to warrant its commitment to the lowest hell, may temporarily exist in the sphere of ghosts as an elementary demon, hobgoblin, imp, or other invisible creature, or it may take upon itself one of the animal forms of the Tiryak state. In both these spheres, there is a choice governed by karma. For some invisible creatures are of higher order than others, as some animals are of a nobler order than the rest. The sattva may be capable, through its efforts in these inferior conditions, of regaining its human estate in the not-too-remote future. Avicii, the deepest hell, is reserved for those whose infamies require the longest to erase. The figures in the various compartments of the wheel represent sattvas enjoying the bliss or suffering from the agony their karma has earned for them. The contemplation of reality, the bodhisattva Avalokitesvara with 8 arms. There is an interesting correspondence, which we cannot fail to note, between the Dharma chakra as pictured and fragments of the Gnostic tradition. The Gnostics are generally admitted to have been in contact with the Orient. In the Gnostic fragments there appears a despotic creative agent, Ialdabaoth, the demiurgus of the world, and he locks the gates of heaven in an effort to prevent men escaping from bondage to himself and his son's creations. Is not Ialdabaoth the monster holding the wheel and the symbol of illusionary existence, and are not the 6 planes or states his offspring, for all the compartments of the wheel are generated from ignorance? The wheel is the mundane globe which all the initiates regarded as a sphere of illusion, escape from which by philosophic means constituted the greatest good. In the center of both the square and the circular diagrams are to be seen 3 creatures holding onto each other's tails and forming a sort of endless chain. These represent the motive power which keeps the great chakra rotating. The hog symbolizes stupidity, the dove lust, and the serpent anger. These qualities are always opposed to that steadfastness and high principle, through the expression of which nirvana is achieved. Thus the wheel continually turns upon this triple axis. For the world only exists as a reality for those who choose to accept it as such. It would be a mistake to view the wheel as intended to set forth literal teachings. The whole concept is purely metaphysical, dealing with the invisible and superphysical planes in their relationship to the physical universe. The Dharma chakra does not reveal places but conditions, and the small figures ornamenting the compartments are not intended to portray literal facts, but to intimate the conditions of consciousness by which the well-being of the sattva is determined. Kokori no Kagami, the mirror of the heart. The Japanese Buddhist wheel of life, with its 10 phases of rebirth. It might not be amiss to insert at this point the formula of escape, by which a sattva, bound to one of the infernal spheres, can hope for release therefrom. The forces which can contribute to the improvement in its condition are 4 in number. 1, when it has completed the karma by which it is bound to that loka, it will immediately depart therefrom into another state. Usually, penitence ensures that the sattva leaving one of the infernal spheres will ascend to a nobler state. 2. Under certain conditions, when a sattva does voluntary penance, it is released from the lower world by the expiration of the period which it has allotted for itself. 3. A sattva may be temporarily released from karma and given an opportunity for enlightenment by the prayers or intercession of a bodhisattva or perfected soul. 4. By the merits directed upon the sattva by others in the same state as itself. In other words, the love and devotion and gratitude of those whom we benefit become vital forces in our own redemption. As a border to both the square and circular wheels are the 12 nidanas. These represent the concatenation of circumstances or causes from effects, themselves in turn engendering causes and moving inevitably from birth to death. The figures on the 2 charts differ somewhat as to detail, but the doctrine is identical in both cases. The doctrine of nidanas reveals the inevitability of consequences, causes flowing into effects, etc. Thus birth, which is the first nidana, inevitably presages death, which is the 12th, and the causes of being follow each other in unbroken sequence from beginning to end, then on to beginning again ad infinitum. The first nidana, unconscious will, is called avidya, and is typified by a blind man or ignorance. In the human life cycle, it represents a sattva passing from death to rebirth. And the second nidana, conformations, is called saniskava and is typified by a potter and his pots. In the human life cycle, it represents the sattva shaping the formless material of its mental and physical natures. The third nidana, consciousness, is called vijnana and is typified by the restlessness of a monkey. In the human life cycle, it represents the rise of conscious experience. The fourth nidana, self-consciousness, is called nama, rupa, and is typified by an ark containing a man, woman, and animals. In the human life cycle, it represents the rise of individuality, the distinction between the self and not self. The fifth nidana, sense surfaces and understanding, is called chadayatana and is typified by an empty house containing doors and windows. In the human life cycle, it represents the dawning realization of the possession of sense surfaces, an understanding with reference to the outside world. The sixth nidana, contact, is called sparsa and is typified by husband and wife embracing each other. In the human life cycle, it represents the exercise of sense organs on the outer world. The seventh nidana, feeling, is called vedana and is typified by delusive pleasures and pains shown by an arrow entering a man's eye. In the human life cycle, it represents the development of mental and physical sensations. The eighth nidana, desire, is called trishna and is typified by a man drinking wine and a woman holding a wine jug. In the human life cycle, it represents desire as the experience of pain or delusive pleasure. The ninth nidana, indulgence, is called upadana and is typified by a man collecting fruit in a basket. In the human life cycle, it represents the clinging to worldly wealth and greed. The 10th nidana, fuller life, is called bhava and is typified by conception. In the human life cycle, it represents temporal life in a fuller form as expressed through the obtaining of an heir. The 11th nidana, the birth of an heir, is called and is typified by birth from the womb. In the human life cycle, it represents the maturity by birth of the heir or the fulfillment of responsibility through offering rebirth to another sattva. The 12th nidana, decay and death, is called yaramarana and is typified by a dead body being carried to the cemetery on the back of a coolie. In the human life cycle, it represents maturity leading to death and decay. After the 12 nidanas comes the first again, and so on indefinitely until the life of enlightenment takes the place of the householder's existence. In the square chakra, the 2 forms of life are represented by the figures in the central circle. Upon the left side, the figures rise to enlightenment, while on the right side they descend to perdition. In concluding the description of the bhava chakra, it should be noted that in each of the 6 states of illusionary existence is to be seen a figure of the Buddha, his body surrounded by a double nimbus. Out of his compassion, the Buddha manifests simultaneously in the 6 states of existence, a thought found in the Christian Gospels, where Christ descends into hell to convert the demons. In every state, mercy and compassion are thus established, and through his forms in the different worlds, he who is perfected in virtue invites all sattvas to join him in the beatitude of liberation. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment, and if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.